The Project. The Project is a cafe and food bank. It was the brainchild of old Ron Harbinger, who had got together the funding from local charities and the council. A condition of the council's involvement was that there was a councillor on the committee. Councillor Woolley was a new member of the committee, but his first remark drew attention. "I don't think people who are getting handouts should be sitting with people who are having a meal." When everybody else laughed, he realised they thought he was joking, so he just smiled and said nothing else for the duration of the meeting. He had a coffee with old Ron afterwards. "I think it's just marvellous that the community is providing this wonderful service." "It's all your fault, you know," Ron said quietly. "Pardon?" "Before your wonderful government, people didn't need so many marvellous food banks, did they?" "I don't know." Old Ron just looked him in the eye and said, "Yes, you do." Councillor Woolley finished his coffee. "Tony, can you come into my office for a minute?" It wasn't a question, not from Malcolm Blunt, CEO of Blunt Electronics. Tony Woolley sat down and tried to look unworried. "Listen, Tony, you have quite a rapport with your section, a certain je ne sais quoi." Blunt always threw the French dictionary at him when he was up to something shady. "There will be a few changes. Entre nous, we are going to have a merger, well, more properly a takeover, with Gastronics. And one or two people will have to go as we slim down the company. You understand? And you would like me to talk to them? I have a list here. Of course, you can assure them that there is a generous redundancy package." Tony Woolley Googled Gastronics. The company website painted them as a caring, environmentally friendly family business. The news channels called them ruthless asset strippers. He called in the members of his section one at a time to tell them about the generous redundancy package. Some of them even thanked him. The next day, Mr. Blunt was not in the office, so Mr. Woolley had to stand in for him. He had a phone call which showed up on the screen as B. Young Gastronics. "Hi, Bazza here. I thought you'd be on your way to the Bahamas by now, Malk." Tomorrow," he said. He didn't like the sound of this. Bazza laughed. "I assume you got that plank Woolley to sack most of the staff?" "Yes." "Well, he's next for the high jump. Tell him yourself, since you're there. We don't want any of your staff on the premises when we take over. Break the sad news that the company has no assets, so there will be no redundancy pay." "Yes," he managed to say, through the shock that was strangling him. "Cheerio, then." He sat and stared at the telephone as if it were to blame for his misfortune. He'd heard about these asset strippers, but thought it was all exaggerated propaganda from a bunch of lefties. Apparently not. He was in the middle of an expensive divorce. His dear wife's solicitors had advised her to take him to the cleaners, and he felt as if he'd been through a hot wash and spin dry. He couldn't afford the mortgage, and he'd received a letter saying if he missed another payment he'll be out of house and home. And then there were the solicitors' fees to consider. Things couldn't get this bad, not for people like him, surely. "Well, I can do your house contents for you, but I can't sell a lot of this." The man looked round the room. "I'll tell you what, since it's you, I think I can stretch to 100 smackers. What do you say, mate?" Councillor Woolley had spent a small fortune on the house contents, but he lacked haggling skills. The look of amazement on the face of the house clearance geezer when he accepted the derisory offer told him that. He had never heard of sofa surfing, but staying with different friends for short periods was preferable to living on the streets. He managed to get £3,000 for the car. That was a seventh of the original price, but it would keep him going for 8 weeks. The job hunt was not going well. The electronics industry was contracting, and he was older than most of the other applicants. The firms wanted people who were dynamic go-getters and not set in their ways. The other applicants were all cocky, self-confident, and had a sense of entitlement. "They are just like I was at 20. That realisation didn't cheer him up at all. That evening, while wearing out his welcome with the councillor, he had this conversation. "Tony, I am only too pleased to have you staying with us, of course. How long do you think?" "I shall be moving on this weekend." As he said this, a vision of the cold shelters on the windy seafront came to his mind, and he shivered. "Well, you see, old man, there's just one thing. I know it's none of your fault, of course, but we have discussed it, and, well, to cut a long story short, we're not too happy about someone with such debts remaining on the council. It's rather letting the side down, you know." "Yes. So you'll be resigning by the end of the week?" It wasn't a question. "We'll get someone else to keep an eye on that project palaver, of course." This blow led him to take a renewed interest in the project. He got talking with one young man, let's call him Terry. Terry was worried about a criminal charge of stealing mobile phones, which would mean going back to prison. "You see," Terry explained, "last time it was my first stretch in Lewis prison, so I had a cell to myself. Now I won't, and there are some pretty hair-raising characters in that place. I don't know what to do about it." "Well, have you considered not stealing mobile phones?" Tony couldn't help asking. He got a punch on the nose for his trouble. Tony's old sleeping bag wasn't of much use. The stuffing had gone out of it, and he had no choice. He needed something to keep out the cold in one of the drafty tramps' hotels on the seafront. He didn't want to bump into Terry or his mates in the ghastly car park. Then the money ran out completely. There was always universal credit, and although he knew it was a world-beating system, it did take a long time to get any money, and meanwhile he needed food. It was a very different Tony Woolley who turned up at the project. The free meal was excellent, all things considered. He ate alone. It became a regular thing for him to turn up for a free meal once a day, and to take his usual corner table. He also started to be glad the council had failed to close the library. He'd get a free look at the newspapers, and it was warm. Without a mailing address, he couldn't get a library card, and that seemed unfair. Then, one day in the project, old Ron spotted him and brought his meal over to his table. "Is it okay to sit here?" "Well, I'm here for a handout, so yes." "They've replaced you on the committee with a right plank. Can't you—" "I'm not a councillor anymore." "Oh, that's easy then. We'll co-opt you. However, before we do that, there is something I want to ask you." "Ask away." "Are you between jobs at the moment?" Tony actually laughed. You could put it like that. "So, could you find time to pop in and visit Terry in Lewis prison and take him a few things? Poor lad hasn't spoken to his family in years, and he gets no visitors." Tony hesitated, so old Ron added, "He can't punch you on the nose in prison. There's a big perspex screen." "You persuaded me," said Tony. "And there is a job, but I think you're both overqualified and underqualified. You don't need a degree, but you do need to be able to cook. But we can give you training. Also, you need to learn to live on minimum wage. The meals will be free, of course. Now take your time." "Yes." "Yes, you'll take your time?" "I mean, yes, I'll take the job." "Well, the committee will have to decide, so we can't co-opt you until after, but the training could start today." "Yes. And no more jokes about people getting handouts." They shook hands. The end.